Chapter 21, Writing Your Research Paper. When you think about writing your research paper, I want you to think about putting meat on the bones of a skeleton. Some people prefer a little more on their bones than others, but just recognize that the skeleton is your outline, and the flesh is that information used to support and fill in the skeleton. When you write your initial draft, focus on getting your thoughts out. Do not waste a large amount of time worrying about punctuation, spelling, grammar, or even quotes. Here you see the standards for paper submission. Use white paper, copy weight. This is usually what's considered 20-pound paper, though it may even be a little thicker than that. Black ink is the only acceptable color, not blue, dark purple, or gray. I've even had a student who tried to give me a paper, it was their final research paper. They had printed it out in blue ink on pink paper. Needless to say, I didn't accept it. You will likely be submitting your paper to me electronically, but if you choose to print it out in hard copy, please don't staple it. Instead, put a simple paper clip on the top near the left-hand corner. Make sure that you use the title page as shown in your book on page 520. In addition, I want an outline as well. Note that the book gives you an example on page 521 of what I want, even showing the way that the page is numbered, the way that a thesis is included, and the way that the author has 3 levels of subdivisions. Number your pages using your header function. Do not type your last name and a page number on every page. The header function will do that for you and will adjust your page numbers accordingly. The correct format is to give your last name, then a single space, then the page number. This information is at the half-inch point. Again, your header function will do that for you. Double space the whole paper. If you're using Microsoft Word, the easiest way to do this is to select all of the text, hold down the Control key, and then push the number 2. No matter what, do not hit a hard return after each line. Finally, make sure that your margins are 1 inch all the way around. Most computers are set up to have an 1.25 inch default margin on the left and the right sides. You'll have to change this, and not doing so will get your paper rejected until the changes have been made. Don't waste that valuable time or lose points. Plagiarism is a very dangerous, disrespectful, and illegal thing to do. Do not just copy what someone else has said without documenting it. Even if you do not use what they have said word for word, you must tell where you've got it. The 2 things that you do not need to cite are common knowledge, also known as you can find it in at least 4 sources, information, and your own ideas, as in your thesis. Remember, when in doubt, cite it. What does the citation look like within the paper? Take a look here. Notice that you have in the first example a direct quote. The quotation marks end, then you have an open parentheses, that author's last name, the page number of the quote, a closed parentheses, and then the period. The second and third examples on this slide show how a summary or a paraphrase was documented. If you have a direct quote that you are using that is at least 4 lines long, you must use what's called block format. In block format, there are no quotation marks. The text is indented in from the left an additional inch. If you find that you need to cite a direct quote and need assistance, you can check your book or let me know. Here's an example of a block quote layout. Many students want to know if they can lengthen their papers by using quotes. Another way that they may ask the same question is, how many quotes can I have? The best way for me to answer that question is to give you this guideline. You should have a minimum of 3 citations for every page of text that you write. Remember that that figure includes citations for direct quotes, paraphrases, and summaries. You should never directly quote more than 10% of your paper. That means that if you wrote a 10-page paper, you can only directly quote the equivalent of 1 page of text. When you can paraphrase, do it. Only use a direct quote when you cannot say it better yourself. As you can find on page 498 of your textbook, a book with only 1 author is included in your Works Cited page, as you see here on your screen. You give the last name of the author, a comma, the first name of the author, a period, then the title of the book. You can either underline or italicize the book, whichever you choose, but be consistent throughout the whole document. This is followed by a period. The city of publication is next, followed by a colon. If the city's not a well-known one, you'll need to list it as city, comma, abbreviated state, colon. The publisher follows, then a comma, the year it was published, then a period. One way to remember the order for the information is all today's children play Yahtzee, which stands for author, title, city, publisher, and year. If you have more than one author, you can see how to note that in your book on pages 498 and 499. If you happen to have two or more items in your works cited that are by the same author, you need to list them alphabetically by the title and only write the author's name for the first entry. The rest of the entries should show just 3 dashes instead of the author's name. Most of you will not be dealing with this, but I'm giving you the information just in case. A periodical entry is similar in its format to a book. You give the last name of the author, comma, first name, period, then the title of the selection or the article. That's in quotation marks with a period inside the quotation marks. The title of your publication is either underlined or italicized, whichever you chose for your books. Remember to be consistent throughout the whole document. In this case, it is not followed by a period. The volume number is next, followed by the publication date, given in parentheses, then a colon, the page numbers from the pages that the article appears on, and a period. Note the way that the month is abbreviated if it's given. Also, if the journal begins each issue on page 1, include the issue number. For example, 55.5 means volume 55, number 5, as given in the last example. Many other examples of similar entries appear on pages 503 and 504 of your textbook. Perhaps if you're wanting to try to remember what order you list the pieces of the periodical entries in your works cited, you can remember the sentence, all aliens must vacate your planet. It stands for author, article, magazine, volume, year, pages. Websites are more challenging, though they're the most widely used sources by my students for research. Remember that in this class you cannot use a site like Wikipedia as a source since it's an online encyclopedia, and no serious research paper will use an encyclopedia as a major source. Page 504 of your text gives you the standard entry for an online source. That order is author, page title, the original publication information as listed as it would have been if it were a standalone, the name of the website, the date accessed, then the URL, that's also known as the website address. Remember that you do need to cite all of that, not just the dots, even if that's what you got when you printed out the page. Pay close and careful attention to the examples in your book on pages 504 through 507. There are examples of ways to cite emails, articles from scholarly journals, online postings in a discussion board area, and more. Here you see 3 more examples of websites that have been cited. For the works cited page in general, make sure that you do not cram all of the information together. The works cited must start on its own separate sheet of paper. The words works cited should be typed at the 1-inch mark from the top center. The W and the C are capitalized, but none of the other letters are. It's also not underlined. Its font should be the same as the rest of the paper. Do not bold it. Put this piece of paper at the end of your report. Unless you have appendices, your works cited page should be the very last page of your paper. The whole page itself should be double-spaced, which means that you double-space before the first entry and between the entries. You also will double-space the entries themselves. Use a hanging indent. As you saw in the examples in your book and in the examples that I posted here, the entries are provided in hanging indent format. Basically, that means that the entries all start touching the left margin, the 1-inch part, and then every additional line of text for that entry beyond the first will be indented 1 tab, or about ½ inch. Make sure that you alphabetize the entries by the author's last name and that you do not number your entries. There's an annotated example of a work cited in its entirety on pages 538 and 540 of your book. Use that as a reference tool as you write yours. There are others in this class who are more well-versed in creative bibliographies, so you may want to team up with them to verify your entries. In addition, there are tutors in the Learning Center who will be glad to sit down with you and answer your questions. They will even go through your paper and your work cited with you, all for free. Make sure that you take advantage of this service if you need it.